everything in here, I've got lots of different artwork in here. Some of it's old, some of it's new. So what I'm going to do is actually show everybody how I create a Collagraph plate. Some of the Collagraphs take hours and hours, so I've got some much simpler ones. This print here, inspired by sort of Scandinavian folk art. I'm going to do something similar to that, and you'll see upstairs the kind of chaos that ensues when I start making a Collagraph plate. It's basically scissors, glue, lots of different texture papers, lots of silver card, sharp knives. Yeah, it's the amount of materials you need just to create one small thing is phenomenal. However, once you've made it, as I said, you can make at least 9-10 prints from it. Each print can be different, and that's part of the fun thing is actually taking the print. So hopefully by the end of today I'll have made one, shellacked it, inked it and printed it. That's the plan. So what I'm going to show you now is how to construct a basic small Collagraph plate, and I've got here some which I created in the past. Now these are actually done on metal. I think it's very, very thin aluminium, and that's just using a very sharp etching tool. So these tools are used for drawing into metal, so they're really good for using onto this silver card, which I'm going to be using. This is the silver card. I've got a big sheet of it here. So it's got a micron thin layer of aluminium, which means you can draw into it using the etching tool and make quite detailed drawing, and also crosshatch and stipple, and you can also use sandpaper, so you can actually sort of do a distressed texture onto the silver card as well. So once printed, once you've inked it up and printed it, any slight alteration of the surface will hold ink, and you will get a really nice defined drawing element in your work. So this is what you use if you've got any drawing to include in your plate. However, you might also want to use more textured things. So I've got here a mixture of different textures, like anagypta wallpaper. You can use things like doilies. This is a snaky textured print I got. It's like a sort of art paper I got from eBay. Different kinds of wallpapers. You can actually, I mean, I go to B&Q and get samples. This is one I've acquired, really useful because they've got sort of swirly rococo looking leaves. So even textures like that in the background, you can use these in your designs as well. But I do tend to mostly use silver card because I like doing a lot of drawing. So lots of these little birds here, that's mostly silver card. This has been printed by the way already, so it's got a bit of the residual ink on it, but it's got little feathers which are cut out of the same silver card and stuck on. So that's a feather which has been inked up before. So they're just stuck down really securely, and normally if I'm printing something on the same day, I would leave it to dry. I would use PVA glue. So this is PVA glue I'd normally use to stick that down, but because I'm going to be creating the plates and hopefully inking up quite quickly, I'm just going to use it's just Yoo-hoo. The important thing is to make sure everything is really flat, so we don't have any mountain peaks. Imagine it being like rolling hills. You don't want to have Norfolk and then suddenly have a massive Snowdonia area in the rear of your plate, because it can actually catch on the plate on the press as it goes through. So it's important to make sure everything's really well stuck down too, because when you ink up, you actually rub the surface quite vigorously. I mean, that is a bit loose there. That's probably okay, but you have to make sure everything's really, really well stuck down. So I did a few ideas. I've been looking at different kinds of very decorative birds, and I've done a few. These are ones I've printed in the past. So I've got different crows, and these have been printed and made into birds. Let me show you one. This I haven't quite finished it yet, so that is similar to that one. These are the cuckoos I was talking about before, so I make these and embroider them. This is all Collagraph onto vintage calico or vintage linen, stuffed and stitched. I've also made lots of different swallows as well. So this is using the same Collagraph plates. So each swallow consists of one side, another side, a top wing, an underside, both sides, and a gusset to make the forked tail. So it's quite complicated, but what I'm going to do today is just one side, so I'm actually going to print onto paper. I've got here an idea. I did some ideas for a bird, and the important thing to remember is every time you create anything in Collagraph, it's going to be printed back to front, so you have to be mindful. I'm also being mindful that the size of paper I've soaked downstairs is this size, so I can't make anything that's going to come over the edges particularly. So this is silver card. I'm going to use the glue. I'm going to just put some different layers on. So I'm going to put it, because I've got a big crease across this bit here and I don't really want to show up, I'm going to put some glue on there and just stick another piece of silver card. This is nice. This is like a silver crepe paper, which is great. It's great because you can stretch it and pleat it. So what I might do is just do a bit of pleating on this one. I'm doing this really quickly because I just want to show you the basic techniques. So I'm going to stick that down like that. And then I'm going to trim off the excess. So I do run Collagraph courses both from my home and from Milestone Studios here in New Mills. So if you want any information about the courses that I run, there'll be some information posted at the end of this film. And I run them sort of 10 till 4, usually on a Friday, but if you want to do them from my own house, just let me know, and I can arrange to have 2 people maximum at home to come and do this. So
what I notice is the difference in this style of art compared to woodcut or lino print is that everything's done at one printing, one layer, as opposed to using multiple printings and multiple layers for the same artwork. You
can print, I mean I have done a Collagraph, and you can do Collagraph over the top of say monoprint. It's not beyond the realms of, you know, possibility to do different layers. I just personally find with my Collagraph, because I print and then the design I want to alter it afterwards, I then sometimes find myself doing layers not with other print techniques, but with adding watercolour and adding pastels or even inks and bleach on top of it. So the permutations are endless with printmaking. You can do so many different things with it. It's great. As it often is, it's a starting point to taking a piece of artwork further and developing it further, and just being curious and thinking, what would happen if I just put brush over the lot of it, sprinkled it with salt and put a bit of bleach on it, and then suddenly you come up with something that you might, oh, okay, right, I like that. These are feathers which I've made in the past, because I do make a lot of wings and I've always got the odd spare bit of feather as well. I'm going to do a wing here. I'm going to give this bird a wing. I'm just going to do some very, very quick drawing on it, again just to show you what you can do with the silver card, because it's not just drawing into it, you can sort of peel layers back as well. I know people have done Tetra Pak prints and they can do the same technique with that, and with that you've got the added excitement of having the sort of creases of the box as well. Can you hear that noise? So picking up that sound, that is the noise you want to hear really, because that means it's actually going through that layer of aluminium. So you can also use a craft knife, and I'm just going to take, what should I do? I'll just do it. With a craft knife you can actually lift off. This is where you think, have I got a first aid kit handy? See what I mean? I've actually now left a sort of woolly texture, and underneath that top layer of foil there's a sort of woolliness. If you go through accidentally to the other side, it's fine. You can actually just put sellotape on the back and fix it. As I said, so I've got all this space here, which is quite nice. I've got different kinds of textures I can use as well. I mean, even something like just plain brown paper and old envelopes. So again, making sure everything's really well stuck down flat. So what I'm going to do is just trim that away. Now normally I would give these a layer of shellac to protect them, because I would be doing more prints from this than just the one. So you can layer on top of layers on top of layers, so I could actually give that another layer there, which I will do. Actually what I might do is give this a layer on top of here. So things like pinking shears are good to get different kinds of marks. So now I've got silver card, brown paper, white paper, and I get to wallpaper, and it's still quite flat. You know, once I've glued it all down, it's still quite flat. And I can just trim that away as well, swoosh it around. I might just use that bit there on something as well, maybe. You see, I'm starting to build up the layers now of different textures. I might do another silver card on top of silver card is really nice. A wonky cart. I'll do a heart. Scissors. And there's another technique I've not even mentioned yet, which is called collage. Sort of turn it off. Collage, which is where you actually incorporate a little bit of extra. It could be text from a magazine, it could be a patterned paper into your final print as well. So I might try and include that as well. What I'm going to do now is use that sharp knife to cut away. This is where you have to be really careful. Actually cut away around the edges. So as long as it's a continuous shape. It is quite hard to do curves with a craft knife. So it's all joined up now. I can peel that heart shape bit back to reveal that sort of woolly texture. So where the silver card is very shiny, obviously, so that's going to be easy to remove ink. Where it's woolly, it tends to hold on to the ink, so you can get more intense colours on there. You could even use sandpaper as a layer, and again that is really good at holding onto ink. So just blunt scissors, so you have to be mindful. So now I've got just silver card, but with a bit that's been cut out. And that should just fit there. So it's more or less done. I think that's as far as I might do a little bit more drawing onto it. So obviously with the U-Hoo it'll take a minute or two to dry. So while it's just drying, I can use my etching tool to turn this eye into like a flower. Right, I was going to put that there. I think that, and you can have things going over the edge as well. As I was saying, I used to always have very boring square cornered plates, even with my collagraphs, because I was still in the sort of mindset of creating a plate like an etching plate, which will be solid steel. But with collagraph you can be a bit more adventurous. Right, so there's my bird, very quick. Just trim that bit there, which is a bit in need of trimming. Right, lid on. So the next stage is always tidying away, getting ready for the inking up stage. I don't put the ink on with a roller. I know some people who do collagraphs just roll ink onto them. I tend to use it's like a polycotton muslin, which is quite cheap, and you can't wash it afterwards. It feels like an awful waste, you know, but I do tend to just throw it away, which is awful. But I actually apply the ink using my finger, so it's very much like finger painting. So it means that your plate is just one stage of something that can become quite painterly. The inks I use are mostly Cranfield oil-based inks, which actually wash off your hands with soap and water. They're also compatible with, these are etching inks, so they are, this is Hawthorn. These don't wash off with soap and water. I think you need Swarthega. You're like Lady Macbeth trying to wash your hands if you use these, but they are compatible. That's one good thing about all these inks, they are all compatible. You don't need much either. They don't tend to dry out, weirdly, as well. You can actually ink up a plate, leave it for a couple of days, it will still be printable. But it does dry, once you've printed it, it does dry quite quickly. So I'm just using 3 colours. I've got Rubine Red, I've got Brown Black, I think this is Yellow Ochre. Even when you've squeezed them, the lids just never stay on because the ink just keeps on exuding. So as I say, you don't need very much at all. I might use a little bit of white as well, so I've got some opaque white here. As I said, normally it would have a layer of shellac, but I'm only going to be doing just the one print here, so it's not really an issue. So Rubine Red with white makes quite a nice vibrant pink. If I add a little touch of Yellow Ochre, it starts becoming slightly dirtier, so it's quite a nice colour. That's sort of like a dull pink colour. So I'll probably start off by using that. When I'm inking up any parts where I've done any drawing, I tend to start with the tip of my finger and really press down like that. I'm really pressing down hard, and what I'm aiming to do is to press the ink that's on my finger into every single little bit of drawing that I've done. Like that. And I've just realised what I haven't done is done any sandpaper. I've actually used sandpaper to, I'm going to do a little tiny bit of drawing with it. You can also, even at this stage, I could go back in now and just do a little bit of distressing. So you can use sandpaper to distress as well. So I might just do a little bit of drawing. I'm just doing this really quickly. You can make tools, and actually when you make a tool out of sandpaper to draw with, it ends up, when you ink it up looking a bit like you use charcoal. It gives it quite a sort of sugarly feel. So I'm going in with quite a mid-tone here. What I really want to do now is get some darker tones on the eye. So where I've used sandpaper, it will really, oh gosh, that's a little bit wet. It will really hold the ink. I'm being careful because it is still slightly wet. I'll leave that while it dries. I'll put some black on here in this heart, so I'll show you this in a minute. So can you see where I've used the knife to cut away to reveal that paper underneath the foil? I can now rub back the silver, but that bit in the middle is still really dark, so that's going to really stand out. And again, I can rub away where I've done the pink on the wing. If I think I've missed a bit, I can go back in as well and re-ink it. So at all stages it's very forgiving, you know, you can change your mind. If I wanted to, suddenly now I could think, right, I'm going to ink it up in blues, and you don't necessarily have to clean it completely, you can just sort of almost wipe off the surplus and crack on. With Anaglypta, there's 2 different ways you can, because it's quite textured, you've got a lot of height in there. You can either get ink on your finger and use this part of your finger and just skim over the top like that, which is quite nice. So then when you print it, you will only ever really have those height, the areas with a bit of height will register. And there's a lot of detail in there. Here's another one. I'll do this in a slightly different way. What I'll do is I'll mix up a very pale ochre colour. So, or you can actually press really hard, so you're getting the ink into all the valleys and the mountain tops. So you're really pressing down quite hard, like that. And then put your finger on a clean bit, pick up again. I'm just literally dabbing a bit of excess off there, and again I'm just skimming over the mountain top. So I've got the red on there, but can you see the actual ochre is in the background? So the ochre is in the valleys and the pink's on the mountaintops. With that, the black's on the mountaintops, but there's nothing in the valleys at all. So there's two different ways of doing that completely. It's just still a little bit sticky, so when I print it, I'm really hoping, sometimes when you print, it can stick to the paper, and it's usually because either the glue hasn't dried yet, or the other reason is you put too much ink on, and I'll show you what too much ink can look like. So the moment it looks glistening like that, that means it's too much ink. And when the plate goes through the press, the amount of pressure is so enormous that you can actually end up squidging the ink, so you get a sort of bleed, a little bit like putting too much ketchup on your plate, you know, it's just too much. You can tell when you put too much, you can actually pick it up with one hand as well. So, beware. That is now come to the stage where I need a clean piece. So I'm going to rub off. See, I've got red all over that area of the neck now. What I can do now is remove any surplus I don't want. I've got anaglyph wallpaper there, so I can easily skim over the top of that bit there. And again, different part of my finger entirely. I'm using the flat of my fleshy part of my finger just to skim over that bit there. Can you see? That makes sense. Sometimes what I do as well when I've finished inking up the main part is I just edge it, so I get a little bit of ink on my finger, dab off the excess, and just, especially if it's somewhere that's quite pale, it's quite nice just to run your finger around the edges, and this just helps to define the actual shape once it's been printed. So I think that's more or less done. I'm quite happy with that. That was a very quick bird. So what I'm going to do now is wash my hands. I've soaked some Fabriano paper. It's been soaking for about an hour. So the next stage is actually taking it down to the press and printing it. Right, so we're ready to print. I've placed the bird onto tissue paper, and what I'm going to do now is just very quickly do a bit of Collage, which is putting a tiny bit of PVA glue on my finger and smearing it on this heart here, and this is going to be affixed to the paper as it goes through the press as well. So this is soaked Fabriano paper, which I'm going to be very carefully lining up and printing. The next thing would be normally newspaper over the top, so I'm making it into a little parcel, and it's going to go through the press twice. So the press, this is the bed, this is the blanket. This operates the downward pressure, so there's two big steel rollers here. So what I'm going to do now is just take it through, just check the pressure as well. I think that's going to be okay. It's quite a lot of pressure. Ooh. That might be enough. I might just slacken it off when it comes through. Sometimes the press can slip. And I've moved the bird cage. This is it's really hard. I end up with massive muscles. I'm going to peep at it just to check I've got enough pressure. Oh yeah, you can see it's embossed there. It looks like it's evenly distributed. The ink always comes through. It's really weird. Yeah, that's fine. I think there's a bit of glue that's exuded slightly. Yeah, it's just, as I said, I wouldn't normally print. So most of the ink that was on here is now being transferred onto the Fabriano.
It's always magic, isn't it, with printing,
Yeah.
when you do this final stage and you go, wow!
And that's the Collage, which is just a bit of brown paper, which is now totally embedded with the glue into this, with the pressure.
Yeah.
Obviously, I used a lot of glue sticking that bit down there, and as I said, normally I'd let them dry for much longer. I mean, this has only about an hour since I made it, but it shows you the technique anyway. There you go. And these are quite nice. I do find the plates themselves, once I've printed them, I get really fond of them, and they're quite nice to use. So
Jo,
that's it.
I've just so much enjoyed today. It has just been enthralling.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for coming over, David.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fabulous.
Oh, thank you.